What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And on today's episode, I have a very special guest joining me, Blake Jude. How you doing today, Blake?
Doing pretty well. I feel like it's going to be a hard way to come on after having Hugh Jackson last time. So hopefully we'll have a pretty good podcast today, though.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this episode. So, have you been doing any scouting or anything like that recently?
Been doing a lot. This is scouting season for the Bengals now. I believe last time I was on, Joe Burrow was still healthy. So now without Joe Burrow and really any chance of winning any more games, been looking towards a lot of different players, especially Penny Sewell in the first round, as you may know, is probably the guy that we're likely to take at pick 3, assuming we do have pick 3. Outside of that, though, a lot of grading in the second and third rounds right now. I'm looking at a lot of defensive linemen, especially. I feel like that can be a good addition to this team. Maybe even looking at a couple of wide receivers in the event A.J. Green and John Ross were to walk. Might need to add an extra guy alongside T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. Yeah, a good bit of scouting. I'm trying to get my official grades coming in now. This is around the area whenever I actually start putting in those grades. And I'll do a couple of updates and stuff like that because guys like Justin Fields are having their grades change every single day depending on how they play. So
That's really cool. So, is there any players to you that you've scouted that you think are much better than media and analysts give them credit for?
Yeah, there's a couple players I really like in particular. Chris Olave, wide receiver out of Ohio State, is a guy that I see marked around the second or third rounds a lot. And he's a guy that I think could be a first-round talent at the next level. His ability on the boundaries to make catches near the sidelines is tremendous. He is a very, very good outside receiver and a guy that I think Cincinnati could use really, really well if he's there in the second round right now. I know that there are people who are a little bit worried about his size and the fact that he really doesn't have the huge frame of a guy like A.J. Green would to be a true wide receiver one. But he's able to use his size that he does have to his advantage, and he's really, really good at contested catching despite his size. I think he has really, really good speed. He's going to be able to stretch the field out more for Cincinnati, which is something that we've been dire for ever since John Ross kind of worked his way out of the lineup. So I think Olave is a guy I really like. And another offensive lineman in particular in the second round that I like a lot is Elijah Vera Tucker, offensive guard out of USC. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to kind of sneak up boards in a little bit. He has potential to also play offensive tackle, which I really like. And I think that he could be a valuable member of the team as being not only a swing tackle, but also probably a starting guard in the future. I like him a lot. I know that he's really being painted out to be a true second rounder right now. I think he also could be a first round talent at the next level. I think he's right up there with Creed Humphrey talent-wise at guard. A lot of people think Creed Humphrey is a pretty solidly better. I think Vera Tucker definitely has a chance to climb up the boards and maybe be that next offensive guard in the first round. So we'll have to see, but he's definitely another guy I like. Those two guys in particular, Olave and Vera Tucker, are two of my favorite prospects in the second round right now.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Olave. If he was there in the second round, I wouldn't mind if the Bengals got him at all. But a wide receiver I'm really a big fan of is Kadarius Toney from Florida. To me, he kind of reminds me of Ross and everything the Bengals wish Ross would have been. But, keep staying on track with college football and scouting. So this past week in college football, were there some games that really surprised you by the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, in particular, BYU Coastal Carolina, one of the better games of the college football season, if you ask me. It was very, very enjoyable to watch, one of the funnest games I've seen in a long time. And ironically, none of them are Power 5 teams. There's an independent and a group of 5 team, and they put on a fantastic game. It was really fun to watch Coastal Carolina's defense go head-to-head against one of my favorite prospects in the draft, Zach Wilson. I had BYU winning this game. I thought Zach Wilson could pull it out. However, I mean, he definitely had a lot of pressure in his face this time around. A lot of guys were getting to his face quickly, made him a little bit more uncomfortable. I thought he still played pretty well given all the circumstances, but overall, I think BYU is as talented all around as Coastal Carolina is. I really, really enjoy seeing Coastal Carolina's fun offense that they run with like a shotgun triple option type. It's really, really cool and really unique. And so they are a very entertaining team. And I think now they're looking at having a really, really good bowl game down the line. I'm really excited to see who they possibly play. If you're looking at a team like Florida to kind of be one of those opponents that goes against Coastal Carolina, of course, I think Gators fans wouldn't be very happy with that. But at the same time, it's a very, very big opportunity for Coastal Carolina. Could you imagine if they somehow beat Florida, how crazy college football would be at that point? That would be huge for the not only for the group of 5, but also for college football in general. I think that would be really, really cool to see, and maybe finally we'll earn some respect for these lower ranking teams.
Yeah, to me, I mean that was an amazing game. And you mentioned Zach Wilson. This might sound kind of crazy. I have Zach Wilson as my number two quarterback, and watching film, there's time I actually see him as my number one, because you really watch him. To me, he reminds me so much of Russell Wilson. His size, I mean, he's mobile. His deep ball accuracy is amazing, and like the ball placement for deep balls for him is just outrageous. And I mean that game, to me, that was, in my opinion, I think it was game of the year. But you can make a case for Clemson and Notre Dame. Which game would you say was better, BYU, Coastal Carolina, or Clemson and Notre Dame?
I actually might give it to Coastal Carolina BYU because Clemson was without their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, of course, that game. So a lot of people think it could have been a fluke somewhat. I still thought the game itself was fantastic to watch a true freshman come in at quarterback and actually contend against one of the better teams in the nation. But at the same time, I felt like at this point, Coastal Carolina and BYU were both at the top. They were at their best at this point. And I find it hard to believe Clemson was at their best in that game against Notre Dame. So for just a pure factor, I think both teams were at the absolute ceiling or how well or at one of the best points they could be right now. Honestly, in the program history, I think it meant a lot more, this game in particular, than it did for Clemson Notre Dame. And I still think, we might see Notre Dame Clemson here down in the future again, anyways, for the ACC title. So maybe that game will redeem itself, and maybe we'll have another great game with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. But we'll have to see. Right now, I'll give it to BYU Coastal Carolina, because I feel like that was the game where both teams were at their absolute strongest, and I think Clemson was at their absolute strongest.
You mentioned Clemson had a true freshman, a starting quarterback when Lawrence was out. I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe Coastal Carolina's quarterback is a true freshman as well. And you really look at his stats. If he was for Ohio State or Alabama, something like that, he would be a Heisman contender. I think he has like 2 interceptions the whole year, about 25 touchdowns. He's a very, very good quarterback, and is going to be a good prospect in years to come in the draft. And I've seen, you talked about Florida and Coastal Carolina. Every single bowl projection I've seen the past week, Coastal Carolina has them playing Marshall, and I think that's unfair to them. I mean, Marshall is not a bad team, but when you're undefeated and you beat a team like Louisiana, who to me is the most underrated team in the country, and BYU, that's very disheartening to play a team like Marshall when you should have a chance to play a Power 5, not just a normal Power 5, like an elite Power 5, like you mentioned, like Florida. I would love to see a game like that. But to me, the game that really stood out the most was Florida and LSU. I mean, Pitt's not playing. Florida loses. Marco Wilson throws a shoe. Like, that's something you were not thought of was going to happen before the game. LSU is one of the worst passing defenses in the country. And Trask didn't play bad, but it was definitely his worst game of the season. He still had a couple of touchdowns, but if you asked me 3 or 4 weeks ago, I honestly thought Florida had a chance against Alabama. I didn't think they'd win, but I thought they had a chance. But the way they played last week, that game is just going to be an absolute blowout, and a win for the Crimson Tide, more than likely.
And it really hurts Kyle Trask's chance at being the Heisman favorite at this point. I still think Trask is up there, and I definitely think he's probably still one of the favorites to win. But having that type of game where it's a team that's struggled very, very badly this season, and LSU looked like they were completely falling apart. This was a must-win game if you wanted to have a chance at the playoffs. This was also a must-win game if you wanted to, in general, get a really good bowl game down the line, I think, because now you're looking at Alabama. If you lose that game again down the line, then it's possible that you're going to be you're still going to probably have a New Year's Six bowl, but not nearly as good of a bowl as what you might have beforehand. You're looking at being, one of those lower, I would say probably in the around 11, 12 ranked in the nation rather than being in the possibly top 6. So that's going to hurt for Florida a lot, I think. And, it's more of a case of Florida's mental mistakes than what it was their play. If the shoe wasn't thrown, I don't think Florida really loses, which says a lot. So we'll have to see how that ends up, evolving for the coaching staff, because I feel like this is a big teaching point for the coaches. Florida definitely has talent to be fantastic for a long time in the future, but I think that they need to get their mental processing to be better and more mature during the game.
Yeah, this could be a good coaching point. Don't throw a shoe during a game. It's really that simple. But Florida lost to a 3-5 LSU team. They dropped one spot. Cincinnati, to me, is a top 6 team in the country. At the absolute worst, a top 6 team. you drop one spot despite not playing a game. Florida will drop more when they lose to Alabama than more than they will when they lost to a 3-5 LSU team. To me, it doesn't make any sense. And there's three two-loss teams above Cincinnati, and to me, it's just the typical Power 5 bias. I mean, speaking of the college football playoff rankings, how would you have your top 4 or top 6?
Yeah, so right now, I think it's hard for me to, not say Alabama is number 1 right now. I think they're by far the best team in the nation currently. Devontae Smith and Mac Jones, that connection has been so much fun to watch this year. He has been such a great receiver to pair with Mac Jones, and I'm very, very happy to see that duo kind of turn out to be the way it has. And not only that, they also had a fantastic defense. Their defense has been all around just great. I love Patrick Surtain, their cornerback. He has been a very, very dynamic player for their team, and it's been really what has locked down their whole entire secondary for the most part. And I think also, of course, linebacker Dylan Moses and a couple other guys in there, Labrin Ray, the defensive lineman, they have just been able to stuff the run and really cause a good force up the middle. It's just been a very entertaining team so far. So I think definitely they are number 1. And for me, number 2 has to be Notre Dame. They haven't lost a game yet. They beat Clemson. Even without Trevor Lawrence, I can't really discredit them. They still won the game. So I think until I see otherwise, until I see them possibly lose to Clemson, they're going to stay as my number 2 team right now. For me, number 3, this is when it gets a little tough because Ohio State's kind of in that awkward position right now. It's where have they played enough games to really earn their spot? They are going to be playing in the Big Ten tournament, which I think is huge for the championship against, I believe, Northwestern. So if they end up winning that, I would put Ohio State personally number 3. I still think they have a lot of talent. And though they really haven't earned or played enough games so far for a lot of people in the committee to be high enough on them, I still think they are talent-wise deserving of a playoff spot. So I'll put them at number 3. And for me, number 4 has to be Clemson. I think right now, as much as I love Cincinnati and some of these other teams, I think Clemson is deserving that number 4 spot. Their only loss came with the backup quarterback, like I said. Trevor Lawrence came back. They have looked really, really good, and they're going to have a chance to redeem themselves against Notre Dame. I think this is a huge game for them, and I think this is a game that they should win. They should come back and beat Notre Dame. It's always hard for a team to win twice against another football team in the same year. We've seen that in the NFL as well. So I think this is a game that Clemson should win and hopefully earn their spot down the line. I think right now 5 and 6, it's really looking to be between Texas A&M and, in my opinion, Cincinnati. Like you said, is deserving of one of those spots as well. I really like A&M. Kellen Mond has been a very, very underrated quarterback this year, and I was really, really happy to see him kind of bounce back. He's starting to earn himself a little bit of draft stock down the line, not really as ever a starting quarterback, but possibly being one of those Jalen Hurts type guys down the line. I really think that's going to be a good idea for Kellen Mond, and I think that their team as a whole has been pretty complete and set together. And as for Cincinnati, one of, if not the best defense in the nation. Majai Sanders is so much fun to watch at defensive end. I think he's great. They have another defensive end as well. I haven't been able to scout him yet, but I'm a big fan of him. And, of course, James Wiggins, the safety. They have a lot of guys on that team overall on the defense. I think makes them elite. If they just had a better quarterback and a better offense, I think that they would be it also really just a better schedule overall. If they had that game against BYU right now, I think they're in the top 4. I would put them ahead of Clemson at this point. It's just unfortunate that, even the teams that they beat later down the line, they've been losing a couple of games, and it just makes their resume look a little bit worse than what I think it actually is. I think the teams that they have played have been really at some of their strongest points against Cincinnati, but now down the line, a couple of these teams lose a couple of games like Liberty, and all of a sudden it doesn't look nearly as good for them. So I still think though Cincinnati and Texas A&M, 5 or 6 for me, I really don't think it makes much of a difference. I see them talent-wise is pretty much even.
Yeah, to me, my top 6 is really not common. 6, I have Clemson. The reason is, to me, the whole year I've said that Miami is one of the most overrated teams in the country. And to me, they clearly proved it this past week. I mean, they gave up over 60 points to North Carolina, gave up over 750 yards. And that, I know Clemson only has 1 loss, and that was to Notre Dame without their starting quarterback. But that was Clemson's marquee win. And if your marquee win and the team that you beat, that was your best win of the season, gives up over 60 points and 750 yards. And, I mean, they had to come back behind from NC State and Virginia Tech to come back and win. And to me, that kind of devalues Clemson's win by a lot. And I'm not saying Clemson isn't good, but I don't really think you can put them in there because that win, because I just really think Miami's overrated. But 5, I have A&M. If it wasn't for the Florida win, I don't think A&M would be in the top 10. You look, I mean, they struggled against Auburn some. They got humiliated by Alabama, but that Florida win was one of the better wins of the season. Number 4, I have Cincinnati, and I get sick and tired of the Power Five bias. I think Cincinnati should be in the playoffs. If any year a Group of 5 team will be in the playoffs, it's going to be this year. Cincinnati is number 9 right now, and if they don't go in the playoffs this year, which how crazy this year has been due to the virus and everything, there's never going to be a Group of 5 team in the playoffs. This was the one chance, and I mean, what does Cincinnati have to do? They're destroying teams. They have the best defense in the country, like you mentioned. They have a really good offense with Desmond Ridder. But I really think the Bearcats should be in the playoffs, and it's really disappointing that they're not going to be. Number 3, I have Ohio State. They've not played many games, but they're one of the most complete teams in the country. Number 2 was Notre Dame. I wasn't sold on Notre Dame until they beat North Carolina. When they played North Carolina, the last 3 games going into that game, North Carolina was averaging over 50 points and over 500 yards. Notre Dame held them to 17 points and did not give up a single point the second half and held them less to 100 yards the second half. And that was a game to me that I really thought Notre Dame was for real. But when I play Clemson this week, they can't have a game like they played against Louisville, winning just 12-7. They have to have a game like they did against North Carolina for them to beat Clemson this week. And number 1, I have Alabama. I don't get how anybody can not put Alabama number 1. To me, they're clearly the best team in the country, and they're two or three tiers above everybody else.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think Alabama's in their own tier. And at the beginning of the season, I was in the Clemson bias. I thought Clemson with Trevor Lawrence, it was going to be hard for anyone to beat them. But now I look at Alabama, and I find it hard to believe Clemson can even stay with them, even with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. So I think it's tough for any team to really beat Alabama. It would be a huge upset if it were to happen. But, it would be very, very fun to see a team like Cincinnati get their chance, even against a team like Alabama, just to see how they would fare. Because we have seen in the past a lot of blowouts in the college football playoffs. Last year, Oklahoma against LSU, complete blowout. Joe Burrow had 8 touchdowns or 7 touchdowns. I don't remember what it was. I believe it was 8. Completely blew them out. Who's not to say that a team like Cincinnati could make it somewhat close? I think they can. And even if they get blown out, it just shows out how good of a team Alabama truly is. Because I think Cincinnati has the best defense in the nation, outside of maybe Alabama. And I would like to see how they match up against the team of Alabama overall on the offensive side of the ball. So, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks down the line. Cincinnati has to have a lot of bad things to other teams to happen in order for them to win. Maybe Ohio State has to not be eligible to play, or even then, maybe Texas A&M has to lose, not to see, of course, Clemson lose again. Maybe a couple other teams have to drop. It's a lot for one team to make it in right now. But Cincinnati, the best thing they can do is just go to their next week and blow out the next team that they have, and just hope that their chances are good. I think regardless, though, we're gonna see them play against a really, really good Power 5 team, and we're gonna truly learn how great Cincinnati is. And I think that's going to tell us a lot about the decisions our college football committee made this year.
Yeah, to me, if Cincinnati's not in the playoffs, which doesn't feel like they're going to be, whoever they play in the New Year's Six Bowl, I think they're going to beat them. I mean, they're going to be just ticked off that they're not in it, and they're just going to destroy whoever they play. But you look at Notre Dame and Cincinnati. If they played head-to-head right now, I know Notre Dame, to me, is the second-best team in the country. I'm not so sure that Notre Dame would win. I mean, you just look at Cincinnati's defense, and Notre Dame has a great defense too, but I don't think that game would be a blowout. I do think Alabama would be more likely to blow out. Ohio State, they would lose. But when Notre Dame beat Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, if Cincinnati was in that situation, I believe that Cincinnati would win that game. If they played, I mean, if you asked me just a week or two ago, I've seen people say that Cincinnati would beat Florida, which a week or two ago would have called you crazy. Now I think Cincinnati would beat Florida. They would kill A&M. I mean, they would humiliate Iowa State and Georgia, and it's really not fair that they're getting a chance. And one question, going back to Florida, I was talking to somebody. They have 2 losses. They're ranked 7. I told somebody if Florida beats Alabama, I think they're going to get in the playoffs. I know they shouldn't, but I think they will because, I mean, it's the SEC biased, and you have the best one in the country, and it's not even close against the easily the best team in the country. Even though they had 2 losses, the fact that you beat Alabama will get you in. Do you think if Florida would somehow beat Alabama, they would get in the playoffs?
Boy, how much the college football landscape would change in just that one game. Um, that's a great question because it really feels like Alabama is the Goliath of the college football year this year, and really everyone else is David. And I don't really think a lot of teams can match up with Alabama at all. It brings the question whether or not you would put them over A&M at that point, because A&M does have the win over Florida, but they also lost to Alabama. So I believe you're lagging somewhat, but I don't know if I'm still here. I think that assuming Florida would win, I think A&M probably earns that spot. But if A&M loses, then I think you have a good chance that Florida comes up and becomes that next seed. I still think Alabama stays in despite losing. I still think they'd at least be a 3 or 4. I would still put them over Ohio State even after a loss to a team like Florida. But I think the biggest question is if A&M or Ohio State were to drop. At that point, I think Florida probably enters. But at this point, losing to LSU is such a huge detriment and a huge loss. I don't know if even beating Alabama earns them a spot unless it has to be another team losing.
You said I was lagging. Is everything all right now?
Yeah, your screen was just a little bit laggy for a second, but I think you're good now.
All right. So I want to talk about the conference championship games. We're going to talk about each conference. And, I mean, some of these games aren't really important, like the lower teams, but they have huge implications on the college football playoff rankings. So we'll start off with the MAC. There's Ball State and Buffalo. Who do you have winning that one?
That's a great question. These lower ranking conferences are a little bit harder to see than others, I think. But I think both Ball State and Buffalo have had really good seasons. I think especially Ball State have been one of the more underrated teams, especially in the MAC. I would like to see them pick up a win here. I think that'd be a really good win for a team that's needed it because they haven't really been as successful in the past. Buffalo's had a couple of really good years in the past, I think. But Ball State's
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, sorry. I think I got a call, but you good?
Yeah, I think Buffalo will win this game. I think Buffalo should be ranked, actually. I mean, Kent State, I think, is the second best team in the MAC. They put up 70 points against them. Jarrett Patterson, to me, this season, I'm not saying he's better than some running backs with the draft, but this season alone, I think he's the best running back in the country. I mean, he had 105 yards last week. It's not great, but he had it at halftime, and he didn't play the second half. He had a 300-yard performance. Next week, he had a 400-yard performance. He's really been amazing this year, and I think Patterson should be – I'm not saying he should win it, but I think he should be a Heisman contender, and I think Buffalo will win this game.
Yeah, I probably should make this clear. I would like to see Ball State win, but they had to stop Jarrett Patterson first, and I don't think anyone's ever done that before. So until I actually see that happen, I don't know if they are able to win. Patterson has been, in my opinion, one of the most overlooked careers in college football history. I mean, he's running for 400 yards, 300 yards in back-to-back games. That is more than what most running backs do in their whole entire season of college football. I know like teams like Kentucky have 3 different running backs who are all like 400, 500 yards running backs, and we think of them as being elite, possibly draft picks in the future. And here we are looking at a guy like Jarrett Patterson who has 702 games. He's ridiculous, and he has been one of the most fun running backs to watch. I watched that game that he ran for 400 yards after I saw what happened, and I mean, every single run was just breakout 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-yard rushes each time. And it's just crazy to think that even though teams know that he's running the ball, he's still pushing it, making it to the end zone.
Yeah, in 2 games, over 700 rushing yards. And like you mentioned, he's had more rushing yards than some people have a season. And like Knox of Marshall, we're both we're high on him. And he's one of the better running backs in the country. And he has like more rushing yards in 2 games than Knox pretty much has the whole year up to that point. So switching gears to Marshall in the Conference USA Championship game, there's UAB and Marshall. Who do you have having that one?
Yeah, Marshall threw a dud against Rice. I don't think many people expected it. This was the game that a lot of people thought that Marshall gets an easy win here, heads towards the conference championship, and possibly tries to get a really, really good bowl game. But you get shut out by a Rice team who apparently had a really, really good defense, played very, very physical in that game. Not much rush could be generated from Brendan Knox. Grant Wells made a couple of mistakes, which, granted, is expected because he's such a young quarterback. It was just a very, very unfortunate game on the offensive side of the ball for Marshall. This is a game that they need to bounce back, especially against a good UAB team. I think this is a game that they do bounce back. And though I am a Marshall alumni, so I do maybe have a little bit more bias towards them, I do definitely know that they are looking to bounce back a lot from this game. This is a big game for them to really help their rankings, possibly, or when it comes bowl time, because if they lose again, their bowl game is not going to be nearly as good as what it could have been a couple weeks back. So I think Marshall wins this game. I do think it's pretty close, though. UAB is a really, really underrated team in the Conference USA. They have had a really underrated season as well, similar to a couple of these other teams in the other Power 5 or Group of 5 conferences, but I think that Marshall definitely sits on the top right now at Conference USA. I think that it's their game to lose. Unless Grant Wells makes a bunch of mistakes and has some issues, I don't think they lose this game.
Yeah, when they played Rice, that was just embarrassing. And to me, that was easily the worst loss in school history. I know you've lost by bigger margins, but with the fact that you get shut out by a team, you were picked to win by 24, you lose by 20, you don't score a single point. And it wasn't even that good of a team. It was a typical Doc Holliday game that they have every single year. They lose a game that they absolutely should not. And with UAB, I mean, I don't know. I want to say Marshall, but in these types of games and big games, I mean, over the years, Marshall, they don't step up like they should. I mean, UAB has been to the conference championship game 3 straight years. Bill Clark is one of the most underrated coaches in the country. I mean, he's took that program from literally nothing. I mean, they won a program, came back 3 straight years in the conference championship game. That's more than anybody else who's currently in Conference USA. And it's just, I mean, I don't know. I have Marshall winning, but I would not be surprised at all if UAB would end up winning that game.
Such a good story about UAB. Yeah, I really hope they make some sort of 30 for 30 or maybe even a movie about them, because like you said, I remember watching the video. I don't remember when it was, 2016 maybe. I don't know if I'm right on that, but around that time, them announcing that they have to end their whole entire operations for their college football team. And I remember seeing how heartbroken those players were, and coming back I believe it was the following year, I think is whenever they maybe it's 2 years after coming back and having to start from brand new, have basically a complete new team. The fact that they have been this dominant now, all these guys gluing together, it was very, very impressive and really cool to see.
Yeah, the video I believe was in 2014, because it was just a week or two after they nearly beat Marshall, and at the time Marshall was ranked, and that was one of the best Marshall teams of all time. And they took on UAB in Birmingham. They only lost to them. And just the following week or two later, they announced that they're not having a team. Regained the team a year or two later, and they've been very, very dominant since. So switching gears to the Mount West, there's Boise State and number 24 ranked San Jose State. Who do you have in that one?
San Jose State has been I believe they only have one loss this season, or do they even have? I believe they have one loss, right?
They're undefeated.
They're undefeated? Okay.
Yeah.
Did not know that, actually. That's actually pretty impressive. So, okay. Boise State's been a team that I have always enjoyed watching. They're one of those teams that really always feels like they don't even feel like a power or a group of 5 team. They really feel like a power 5 team that's just playing in the group of 5. They get a lot of really good talent and recruits for a group of 5 school. I think one of the best recruiting group of 5 schools out of any of them. But San Jose State, they've been riding a wave, I guess. I thought they lost previously this season, but I could be wrong. But I do know, regardless, they've had a really, really good win streak as of late. And if they continue to go on that, I think they could win this game. But I'm never going to count out Boise. Boise always seems to come up whenever playoff time comes and just throw out an impressive game. I think this is another game where definitely could be the case. So I'll go for the upset here. I'll pick Boise to win this over San Jose State, despite their fantastic season.
Yeah, this is kind of a toss-up to me, but I have Boise State winning because Boise State's only loss was to BYU this year, and that was without starting quarterback Hank Bachmeier. That's a huge. I mean, if he played, I'm not saying they would have beat BYU, but it would have been a whole lot closer. And Buckmeyer playing this game, I have Boise State winning. Next up, to me, this is the most underrated conference game of the season. Number 19, Louisiana, taking on number 12, Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is undefeated. Louisiana is 19. They only have one loss, and that was to Coastal Carolina. Louisiana beat number 6, Iowa State, by 17 points to begin the year. I know Coastal Carolina is so underrated, but I think Louisiana is the most underrated team in the country. This is a toss-up, and just a week or two ago, you thought whoever wins this game has a chance of getting the New Year's Six Bowl. But with Cincinnati probably not going to the playoffs, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, this is going to be a great game. I can't wait for it. Like, this to me is probably one of my favorite games of the week. I have Coastal Carolina winning. I would not be surprised if Louisiana would end up winning.
I think if there's one team that could possibly beat Coastal Carolina realistically out of any of the teams Coastal has played this season, and possibly even any group of 5 team in general, maybe outside of Cincinnati, I think it'd be Louisiana. I think, Louisiana, especially now they have a whole entire game film against them. Like they know how Coastal runs their offense. It's going to be important for Louisiana to adjust and figure out how to win this game. Coastal Carolina is just different this year. I mean, I have never seen a team like this. I have not. This is the most unique team I have seen ever. They've a Georgia Tech type offense, which Georgia Tech already had one of the most unique offenses we've seen ever with their triple option. We're seeing that type of offense with a very, very fun and interesting defensive scheme as well, because they run several different schemes. They never really run the same thing, which granted a lot of teams in Power 5 don't, but in the group of 5, a lot of teams have to stick to their bread and butter, which is like a 4-3 defense or a 3-4 and never really change it up. So Coastal is playing like a Power 5 team right now, and until I see them mess up and show that they are, honestly, I think it's hard for me. It's hard for me to believe that Coastal Carolina can lose if they don't mess up themselves. They are just that good of a team. If they run their plays right, they're going to win. I really don't know how to stop this, and I don't know if Louisiana knows how to. But if they do know how to, they're going to do it in this game. So I'll take Coastal Carolina to win. I think this is a very, very close game, though. I think this is a game that can go to the last minute, maybe a last-minute field goal, last-minute touchdown. This could be an overtime game. These two teams are really, really good. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, we talked about Coastal Carolina and BYU being one of the best games of the season. This could potentially be right up there with them. This will be a great game, but I mean, it's really, really intriguing matchup. I mean, to me, the best group of 5 teams, obviously Cincinnati's number 1, but number 2 is Coastal and number 3 is Louisiana. I mean, these are teams you don't want to play, and I mean, you prove it by beating number 6 Iowa State by 17. I'm really, really looking forward to that game. Switching to the American, number 23 Tulsa takes on number 9 Cincinnati. I think Tulsa is a good team. This is going to be a blowout because, I mean, Cincinnati, they've not played in a couple weeks. They were supposed to play Tulsa just a week or two ago, but mad they're dropping when they shouldn't. They're mad they're dropping when they can't help it, and they're not playing games, and they're dropping one spot each week. But, I mean, at Cincinnati, this, to me, will not be close at all. I expect them to win by probably about 30.
This is the game where Cincinnati needs to insert their dominance and show that they are legit. This is the top 25 team in Tulsa, and if you blow them out by 30, that is huge for your resume. And this is what they need. They need a good resume win. They've beaten Liberty, they've beaten a couple other teams, but they don't have a signature. Well, I'll call Liberty a signature win, but I feel like blowing out a team like Tulsa in a championship is a huge win for any team. I think for Cincinnati, it goes very, very far. If you win this game by 30, like you said, I find it hard to believe you put any 2-loss team ahead of them. I think this is a game where you put them over them at that point because, I mean, it's a signature win. It's a top 25 win, and it could be a blowout. I think Tulsa is a little bit slept on as well. I think they can keep this game a little bit closer. I don't know if it's going to be a 30-point blowout. I can see this being within 14, around that area. I could see that being like a 35-21 score or something like that, or I don't know, maybe like a 17-34-ish. Cincinnati's defense is just really, really hard to game plan against, and their only thing that can kill them is possibly field position, and that's only if their offense can't move the ball, which is pretty uncommon for them anyways. So this is going to be a tough game for Tulsa, and I think it's going to be a win for Cincinnati here.
Yeah, the Bearcats keep dropping each week. And just a couple weeks ago, when Notre Dame defeated North Carolina jumped up 2 spots after losing to Notre Dame. They didn't score a single point in the second half. Like I said, they didn't have 100 rushing yards, 100 total yards in the second half, and they go up 2 spots. And Cincinnati's continuing to drop, and it's just not fair to them. The reason I think Cincinnati, I just really think it's going to be a blowout. This really reminds me back in 2014. If I'm a Marshall fan and nobody's noticed, but 2014, Marshall played Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois was the MAC champions that year, and everybody around here, they lost to West Kentucky the final play of the game of the regular season, but they lost that game. To me, I still think they should have went into the New Year's Six Bowl, and everybody around here was so upset. But when they played Northern Illinois in their bowl game, that was the best performance total game I've ever seen in Marshall. They defeated Northern Illinois by, I believe, like 30 or 40. And Northern Illinois, like I just said, was a MAC champion. They had a 10-win season. And, I kind of expect that type of performance from Cincinnati because, they have so much to prove. They've not played in forever. They're ticked off. You have to win this game by at least 30 to be considered to be in the playoffs. If you don't, I don't know what the spread is, but if you don't double it, you're out at least, easily to me. But if this is a 14-point game, they have no shot. This is either blowout or bust for the Bearcats that game.
Yeah, I think with a 14-point win, I personally would put them over Florida, and I don't know who the other two is. That Georgia is the other two lost team ahead of them. I
Yeah.
think that probably earns them a spot over because Georgia won't be playing in this game, and Florida's likely to lose to Alabama. Assuming that does happen, that puts you at 7, right? So you still have A&M,
Iowa State.
Iowa State. That's right, and I'm blanking. Clemson as the 3 other teams ahead of you. Your best bet at that point would be to hope that either Iowa State loses or plays a really, really close game to which they could have possibly lost, and then maybe having I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it's hard because A&M's not going to be playing, and they're going to always be above Cincinnati because of their amazing resume. The fact they only lost to Alabama. That's the perk of being the second best team in the SEC West, you see, because, the team like Alabama, it's the most understandable loss. But if you go undefeated for the rest of the season, you're like, well, they've won a lot of good games, but their only loss is against the best team in the nation. So I guess you are right. Unless the committee somehow decides that Cincinnati's win was good enough to put them ahead of Texas A&M, who's only lost to Alabama, then I think that it's pretty much impossible for them to make it, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, 3 two-loss teams are ahead of them. Iowa State, Florida, and Georgia. 2 of those teams are in conference championship games. So those teams lose. And if Cincinnati would win by 30, that makes it a lot more interesting. So switching to the Power 5, the Pac-12, Oregon, and number 13, USC. USC, like I've said, Miami's one of the most overrated teams in the country. I'll say it with USC too. Just up until like a week or 2 ago, they didn't beat a team who had a win on the season, and they beat a 1-win team. I can't remember who it was, but they jumped up like 4 or 5 spots. Pac-12 is the most overrated conference in the country. If you put Cincinnati would literally beat every single team in that conference to me. Oregon, I just don't think they'll win. It's not because they're bad. I don't think USC is good either. It's just I don't think this is a big game because to me, I've seen percentage rankings. USC have a better chance to be in the playoffs than Cincinnati, which is ridiculous. But in my opinion, this game really doesn't have. I don't think it changes anything with the college football playoff rankings. I have USC winning, by the way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's dumb to think that USC is going to have any chance of making it over Cincinnati at all, or even make it to the playoffs in general, because Cincinnati has a far better schedule, and that's the only issue Cincinnati's had this year is their schedule. So if their biggest weakness to not being in the playoffs is better than USC's, I don't see how you could assume that USC deserves to be over them at that point. I think that's just dumb to me. I don't think it's a scenario that I can imagine in my head. Oregon's a good school, and they're definitely a school that's recognized, but I think, Cincinnati, assuming they beat Tulsa and they also beat Liberty, I think those 2 teams are better right now resume-wise than Oregon is in a win. So That's two better wins than USC's signature win, assuming they even beat Oregon. The Ducks this year are in a huge transition season. Of course, you lose Justin Herbert, which is a huge loss to your team. You still have a pretty good amount of talent. I know they have a really good running back. I believe is it C.J. Verdell? Is that his name? I cannot remember exactly. Yeah. I feel like I've heard that name. I don't remember if it was for Oregon or not, but I haven't really scouted a lot of Oregon players at all outside of Javon Holland, the safety. So I got to admit, I haven't watched a lot of Oregon football. But I've seen a lot of USC. I like the offensive line a lot. I already mentioned Elijah Vera Tucker earlier. I think he's a really good offensive guard. And it's been really, really good for them in the rushing game whenever they do run the ball. So I'll take USC in this game because I definitely know the team better this year, and I definitely have a lot more experience with them. And Oregon's in such a huge transition year right now. I know that their passing game hasn't been nearly as good as what it has been in the past, Justin Herbert. So I think this is a game where USC probably could win.
Yeah, so the Big 12, number 10, Oklahoma takes on number 6, Iowa State. If Iowa State Cyclones loses, this could be big for Cincinnati. So Oklahoma, Iowa State, who do you have winning the Big 12 championship?
Give me Oklahoma to win this game. I like Iowa State a lot. I got to give them credit. There are definitely a lot of players on that team that I am very impressed with scouting-wise, and I think can be good. But I'm never going to sleep on Lincoln Riley and his offense with Oklahoma. They are susceptible to scoring 40, 50 points in a game just out of nowhere. And after really struggling the first couple of weeks, a lot of people thought Oklahoma's dynasty was over with Spencer Rattler taking over at quarterback. They have bounced back and have been one of the best teams in the nation, and as of late at least. They haven't really had a signature wins, but they've been winning very convincingly against some pretty solid teams, I think. So I'll take Oklahoma here. I think that they have really turned things around, and they definitely have a lot of momentum entering this game. And so does Iowa State, granted, but I think at this point Oklahoma's offense is going to be very capable of scoring a lot of points in this game, maybe pulling off a pretty close win.
Yeah, I also have Oklahoma winning. I mean, the first couple of weeks, Oklahoma struggled, as did Iowa State, but Oklahoma's finally figured out like who they are now, and Rattler's more experienced. So I'll take them over the upset with the Cyclones. The Big Ten championship game, number 14 Northwestern takes on number 4 Ohio State. I think Ohio State, I mean, Northwestern's not a bad team. They're a good team. But to me, this is kind of like the Cincinnati game. You know, Ohio State hasn't played much. And, I mean, there's talks about could they be kept out of the playoffs, which to me is ridiculous. But I don't think this is going to be close. The Buckeyes will win this one because I just really think it'll be a blowout and prove that they should be in the playoffs.
I believe Northwestern's only loss this year is against Michigan State. Am I right about that? I feel like that's
I think so.
Yeah. So they've only lost one game, and I remember listening. I was actually listening to the radio at that time of people previewing the Northwestern Michigan State game and saying that like if Northwestern wins this, they're looking at possibly having a chance to hop over Ohio State for the college football playoffs. Northwestern is to me, it kind of feels like the Kentucky Wildcats of 2 years back. Though they might not have the star power that Kentucky did back then with Benny Snell and Josh Allen. There's always this one. I feel like there's always this one team that is always lower than what people expect. That kind of just pushes and has a really, really good season. We've seen this with Baylor, Kentucky. Baylor's a pretty good school. I don't want to say that, but they haven't been great in the past. West Virginia's had those seasons. Like I said, Kentucky, and you also see them from like I said, now Northwestern. I think is that new team. So, the loss against Michigan State really hurt him and really hurt my opinion on him because that was a game I actually got to watch afterwards. After the game was over, I went back and watched it a little bit, and Michigan State just looked like a much better team at that point. And even then, Ohio State's a lot better than any other team in Michigan right now. So, Justin Fields is a different animal. I love Justin Fields, and I think he is going to be such a great player at the next level. Like I said, I like Chris Olave a lot. I think their defense has shown some holes a little bit, but are still really, really good. I still like Sean Wade and some of these guys on their defense. So I think that this is a game where Ohio State needs to win to make the playoffs, of course. And this is a game that they will win because they need to beat Northwestern, and it's going to be a big game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a blowout by Ohio State. They'll beat them by 20 plus. But you mentioned Northwestern, talking about teams who are kind of lower, not really talked about, but they're ranked high. For instance, I believe it was last year in the Big 12 championship game. Nobody really talks about it or thinks about it. Charlie Brewer, the starting quarterback of Baylor, got hurt that game, and if they would have won, they would have been in the playoffs. And it's just really crazy when like just a team you don't really think of, well, they're good, but just one or two plays it would have literally changed the outcome of the college football playoffs Final Four. But of Northwestern, I mean, they do have a lot to prove too. Nobody's really giving them a chance, and I mean that would be a huge win. But let's say Northwestern shocks the country and defeats the Buckeyes. It's not likely, but if they do you think they should be in the playoffs?
No, no, they do not deserve to be in the playoffs. They lose. Sorry, talking about Ohio State. My fault. Ohio State definitely does not. If they lose, they're out. Northwestern, still a one-win team. It's a signature win like that would do wonders for their team overall. But again, Texas A&M, I don't know if you put them over Texas A&M even after a win like that. I think this is a scenario where you can legitimately see Northwestern hop up to be number 5, maybe number 6, but especially if Clemson beats Notre Dame and we still see those two in the playoffs. I find it hard to believe Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, or Texas A&M would let a team like Northwestern, even after winning against Ohio State, hop them in the playoffs. I think knowing how the committee chooses, I think you definitely hop over Cincinnati, probably hop over all the 2-loss teams like Florida, Georgia, and Iowa State, but I don't know if they hop over Texas A&M.
Yeah, I agree. Northwestern, I mean, I think beating Ohio State at this point, the way Florida played last week, is a much better win than beating Florida because Ohio State's still undefeated. They look like the more complete team, even though they don't play as many games. But like we've mentioned, A&M's loss was the best team in the country. They got humiliated, but that's the best team in the country. You can't lose to a better team than them. Like we said, Northwestern's loss was to Michigan State, who I don't even believe is currently 500 right now. So that kind of, to me, kind of says it all for them. But switching gears to the SEC championship game, continually talking about Alabama, number 1 Alabama against number 7 Florida. If you would have asked me a month ago, I really thought Florida could have won. Florida's defense is the worst it's been since, Will Greer maybe, 2015. I try to watch him a lot. Aside from Marshall, I would say Florida would be my favorite team. But yeah, I mean, I just don't understand their defense. I mean, they lost Grenard in the draft. They lost David Reese as well. But I don't understand how Florida's defense has just dropped all of a sudden. And Trask, I mean, he's had an outstanding season. Tony, I mean, he's spectacular. Pitts just needs to stay healthy. Pitts would have played last week. I mean, they would have won, but that's not something you should have had to say when you play a 3-5 team. Alabama's defense, they played Arkansas, and I believe they gave up 3 points, but 52-3, something like that. When Florida played Arkansas, it was like 60 or 50 something to like 35. Like they have such high offenses, but I don't think Florida is going to be able to score more than 24, 30 points because how good Alabama's defense is. Alabama's offense, it's a top 10, top 15 offense in the country that we mentioned. I mean, they have a Heisman contender, Matt Jones, and so many other spectacular players on their offense. I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama put up at least 50 because, you gave up 37 to LSU, who starting quarterback was the first ever start. You still give it 37 points. You give it 38 to, I believe 38. Oh no, 41. Excuse me, to Texas A&M. Yeah, I think this is going to be like a 50 to 24, 27 type game, and further proof that the Crimson Tide is easily the best team in the country.
Yeah, I think Alabama wins this game. I could see it being a little bit closer, though. I want to give more respect to Kyle Trask because what he's done this season has been extremely impressive. I mean, he has been, in my opinion, the most consistent, up until the LSU game, has been the most consistent and best quarterback in college football, which is saying a lot with the season of having Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields, 3 great quarterbacks all there. The biggest issue, I think, for Florida, as you said, is their defense. Their defense has not been able to hang with anyone at this point. You lose your cornerback one last year, C.J. Henderson, who I think they really, really missed this year. They missed that cornerback one to kind of help them, especially in a game like this against Devontae Smith and the Crimson Tide. It's going to be hard for them to find and stop him. Even then, though, I think, Najee Harris, of course. You have guys like on the outside like Mechie, who can be very dangerous deep threats. This is a tough game for a Florida defense that has struggled big time this season. And, no, I think they put up a lot of points. I can see them putting up 30-plus points against Alabama, maybe like 35. I still think Alabama, like you said, they're very, very capable of putting up 40, maybe even 50 points. I think this game is somewhat close, but I still think Alabama wins this pretty comfortably.
Yeah, talking about Trask, talk about Heisman contenders in just a second, but the final conference championship game is number 2 Notre Dame taking on 3 Clemson. Like I said kind of earlier in the episode, if Notre Dame plays like they did against North Carolina, I feel like a Fighting Irish would win very comfortably. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout, maybe like 7 or 10 points, but the way they played against North Carolina, I don't get how they don't win this game. I mean, Sam Howell at the time was throwing for 400 yards a game to find, up to that point. They held him in check. They scored 2 straight touchdowns to the first 2 opening drives. They scored 3 points the rest of the game. Like I've said a couple of times, they did not even allow 100 yards to a Tar Heels team who just put up 750 yards to Miami, who was a top 10 team. But Notre Dame has to stay consistent. I know they're undefeated, but they've been inconsistent because people don't really talk about it because they're undefeated. Like I said, they beat Louisville, who's really bad. Louisville was one of the worst defenses in the country, and they just scored 12 points against them. But Clemson, like I said, I mean, their only loss obviously is the Fighting Irish, and that was without Lawrence. Clemson, even with Lawrence at times, have played really bad with Syracuse and I think it was Boston College. Boston College. Boston College played Texas State, and Boston College scored like 24 points the whole entire game. Clemson played Boston College, and at halftime they gave up 28 points a game. They are really, really inconsistent to me. And even with Lawrence, I don't feel like the Tigers would win this comfortably. This is going to be a close game, has huge implications on the college football playoffs, and this is easily the most important game of the week. I have, I'll go bold. I have the Fighting Irish winning, which is something I would never said a month ago.
Ian Book has been crazy good this year, and I mean, there's been so many underrated players and teams this year that I think a lot of people didn't really see coming. And that's probably due to the COVID and the fact that we haven't really been able to see camps and see how good players actually are. And guys like Ian Book, who people questioned if he was going to ever become a pretty good quarterback or a winning quarterback, all of a sudden now he's leading the second best team in the nation against the team at Clemson in the game that people think they can actually win, which is very, very impressive. So I'm going to take Clemson in this game, though. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be Trevor Lawrence, and he's going to be a difference maker in this game. And despite them having some struggles lately, I definitely thought that their freshman quarterback that they played against Notre Dame with definitely showed some plays that I think Trevor Lawrence could have done better, in my opinion. Of course, he's a true freshman. I'm not going to blame him, but true freshmen make mistakes, and that happens. And Trevor Lawrence is just such a complete quarterback, such good pocket awareness, able to get outside, run the ball a lot, such a great arm. I mean, he is the total package at quarterback, and he's going to make Notre Dame's life on defense very, very hard. So I'll take Clemson in this game, in a very close game, though, and I think they earn their spots in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, if Clemson wins, they're obviously and I kind of mentioned earlier I have Clemson 6, but that's because Clemson's backup quarterback, I don't know how to say his last name, but he played a fantastic game against a Fighting Irish defense. And to me, lots of people give Clemson the excuse what Lawrence was out. And the thing I look at years past, Alabama was trailing, I believe it was Georgia in the championship game. Saban went crazy. Shocked everybody, put 2 in the second half. They came back and won with a backup quarterback. Cardale Jones led Ohio State to a championship game. So, I don't really like the excuse that Clemson is still a top 4 team. But, their backup quarterback played amazing. And I think they should have won that game. I don't really think their struggles, even with or without Lawrence, has nothing to do with Lawrence. I just don't think they're as good as people expect. but it's going to be a great game. I don't know. I mean, we've kind of talked about Lawrence, we've talked about Trask and Fields a little bit, but switching gears to the Heisman. Who would you say is your Heisman favorite? Who do you think should win it?
Yeah, who I think wins it and who I think should win it might be a bit of a different answer. Um, you know, I think what Trask has done this season has been very, very impressive. And I think despite losing against LSU last week, I think he's still shown enough to possibly be the Heisman favorite. If you ask me who I think does win it, I feel like the committee's probably going to lean towards Mac Jones for Alabama, simply because Alabama has been the best team in the country by far. And Mac Jones, granted, has a very, very good team around him. And I think that's probably why I really don't think of him as being a great NFL quarterback. I don't think he's going to be like that NFL guy that you're going to see in the future. But as for college football and the fact that he has Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, a fantastic offensive line, led by guys like Alex Leatherwood, he has had everyone around him to make the necessary throws and play really well, and he has played really well, granted to him. He's made some great throws, very impressive throws, and I think especially after Kyle Trask's dud that he kind of pulled against LSU last week, I think this is probably what puts Mac Jones over the edge to win it. But if you ask me who I think should win it, that's a good question because, Trevor Lawrence hasn't been great, but he's still been really good. And I think Trevor Lawrence is definitely a guy that I think should be heavily considered to win it. But at the same time, Florida would not be as good as what they have been this year if it was not for their fantastic offense. And I think Kyle Trask really, really, even after that game against LSU, I think he is still very capable of being fantastic. I mean, we have seen him in his connections to guys like Kadarius Toney, like you mentioned earlier, and Kyle Pitts have been just special to see right now. And I think Kyle Trask has done more on the opposite side of the ball for Florida than what Mac Jones has for Alabama, because I think Mac Jones just has a very, very good offense around him. So if you ask me, I would probably give it to Kyle Trask even after that dud game.
Yeah, to me, nobody is close to, in my opinion, to Trask. I mean, he has 40 passing touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, and 2 of those were just in the past week. He also has 2 rushing touchdowns, 370 passing yards a game. His completion percentage is 70. And you look at what Florida's offense did with Felipe Franks last season, just for a couple of games. They weren't really good. You look at the year prior, the Florida Gators offense with Felipe Franks struggled a lot. And you mentioned Florida's offense would not be what it was without Trask. Absolutely. I mean, you look at the last time Florida's offense was relevant, that was in 2015, I believe. That was only like the first 5 games because Greer got suspended and then transferred to West Virginia. That was the last time Florida's offense was better than average. And now they have a top 5 offense in the country. And you did mention Matt Jones. I've seen people say that he should win, which to me, I mean, he's had a really good year, but I just think it has to be Trask. If Trask doesn't win, I think this is one of the biggest Heisman snubs of all time, easily. Matt Jones, like you said, he has so much talent around him. He has a much better team. And this game, in the SEC championship game, Trask needs to play well. I don't think he needs to play great to win, but he can't have a couple of turnover performance. And I think Mac Jones is going to be really, really great in this game because the Florida Gator defense is just so inconsistent and horrible. If Jones plays really well and Trask just plays like I did against LSU, I think Trask should still win, but I would not be surprised at all if Matt Jones would go above him and win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that, maybe the winner of this game could decide it, or maybe even if Florida loses and Trask still plays really well, if there's like 300 yards or 400 yards and a couple of touchdowns, I think Trask could still win it. But if this is a blowout game like you said it could be, with Alabama dropping 50 points against Florida, Mac Jones throwing for 300, 400 yards and having a perfect game pretty much, then, I think it's hard for the committee to not give it to Mac Jones because of that, because he has the head-to-head win over the other guys. So it's going to be tough. I agree with you, though. I think despite this next game coming up, I think Trask deserves to win it simply because of what he's done this season overall. But I think the committee is going to wait for this game in the SEC championship between Florida and Alabama to really decide the winner.
And something else, you look at up to that LSU game, you look at Trask stats and Burrow stats. I'm not saying Trask is better than Burrow. I'm simply saying look at the stats. They are like really, really close up to the LSU game. And the difference is Burrow played, I believe it was like Northwestern State or somebody like that, and Georgia Southern in the non-conference games last year. This is an all ACC, all SEC, excuse me, games. Every single game he's played is an SEC opponent. And to me, if we look back and Trask doesn't win the Heisman, or if he does, regardless, this season needs to be like he needs to have so much more credit, and people need to talk about him so much more because it's an all SEC opponents, clearly the best conference in the country. And the fact that you're still averaging 370 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions, this is, I mean, everybody thought Burrow's last season was the best season ever for a quarterback. It definitely is, but Trask has played well. I think this is one of the better performances we've ever seen, too. I'm not saying it's better than Burrow's, but regardless if he wins or not, Trask deserves so much credit for playing so great against like high-quality opponents.
Despite there being 4 quarterbacks who I think are almost locked to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, that being Lawrence, Fields, Lance, and Wilson, I think this season makes it almost impossible for NFL teams to pass up on Trey Lance if he is still in the first round. I don't think there's a scenario where he does not get drafted in the first round because of this year. We've seen what Burrow's production turnover was fantastic with the Bengals up until he got hurt. This is another team, like I can especially see a team like maybe the New England Patriots looking at Kyle Trask and seeing what he's done this year and thinking this can be our next Tom Brady. I'm not calling him Tom Brady. He's not going to be that. I don't think he's ever going to be that great of quarterback again. But if you give him Bill Belichick, Kyle Trask can be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, immediately almost. So I think Trask is going to definitely earn a good paying contract for his rookie season in the NFL this year, even if he doesn't win Heisman, because he has just been fantastic, like you said, and has had one of the better college football careers we have seen, or college football seasons we have seen in quite a while. I think it's downplayed a little bit because of what we've seen from Burrow last year, but what people don't realize, what we saw from Burrow last year was a fairy tale. We've never seen that ever at all. Kyle Trask is playing to the level of what we have almost not imagined either. I don't think realize that. So yeah, but I still think it's going to be I still think it's going to be possible that Mac Jones probably wins this, but I still think Kyle Trask earned himself an NFL first round pick.
Yeah, you mentioned the NFL and the draft. The Patriots pick right now, I believe, like 14, 15 range, kind of in the middle of the pack of the first round. And I've seen mock drafts. Something I love to see happen is Pitts get picked in the middle of the first round. The Patriots move up towards the end of the first round and draft Kyle Trask. If you're in New England, if you draft Kyle Pitts and Trask, I mean, that could be really interesting. That's going to be fun to watch. And something else I've looked about, and it's talked about with different people, especially with, the Steelers, their drafts right now, their current spot is dropping because they're losing. I mean, you look at Pittsburgh and Kyle Trask, to me, that makes a lot of sense. I know quarterback might not be the top need for Pittsburgh, but to me, when I've not done a full mock draft yet, I've not done a whole lot of scouting. But if Kyle Trask is available wherever the Steelers pick on the first round, I don't see a better fit for a quarterback or any quarterback in the draft or a team to draft somebody than Trask going to Pittsburgh.
That would be so huge for Pittsburgh. I mean, as much as I respect Big Ben for what he's done in his career, I think these 3-yard checkdowns have really limited the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And I think that if you gave the Pittsburgh Steelers got Kyle Trask, who has shown so much capability of getting receivers deep and getting a bunch of deep throws and also getting his tight end involved, it'd be so huge for guys like Eric Ebron, even Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster to have huge seasons. The guy Kyle Trask who can really get them more involved than what they are right now.
Yeah, Pittsburgh's offense is really good, and their offense is pretty good as well. But I think they can elevate Trask and make him. Trask may struggle a little bit, but they can also help him because how good their offense is. So we've kind of talked about Trask and the Heisman, some conference championship games. We'll switch gears to the NFL now. And we've talked about college football like the whole episode. But was there any games this past week that you were surprised with in the NFL?
I don't know if surprise is the word. More or less, a huge game for the Buffalo Bills to take down the Pittsburgh Steelers, in a game that I think they really, really needed to win because the Miami Dolphins look legit now. And there was a scenario where Miami beats out Buffalo, and Buffalo's fighting for a wild card. And for them to win this game against one of the better teams in the NFL right now, in Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's huge for the Bills to really secure their spots to win that division and possibly be the three seed in the division, which not really any fans this year, so the fans idea wouldn't be huge, but still having the home field advantage in general, I think is just helpful to not have to travel that far to play the game, and to be able to stay home. I think it's going to be key for them, and they're going to be playing against a team instead, maybe I believe right now they're looking at possibly maybe the Dolphins actually as their team that they have to play against right now. So that'll be interesting to see. Rather than possibly being that 5 seed and having to play against maybe a Indianapolis Colts team who is, you can argue the Dolphins and the Colts are, Dolphins are probably the better team right now, but I think that the Bills, maybe matchup wise, know the Dolphins a lot better and can probably match up with them a lot better. So maybe that would be it's an important win there for the Bills, and it really shows that they are legitimate contenders down the line. So I was very, very excited about that game.
Yeah, to me, I agree. I think this game kind of proves that the Bills are for real. I think they're a top 5 team right now. I think they're the second best team in the AFC. And I know during the game it was close at times, but to me, I kind of think that this kind of proved the Steelers are overrated. I mean, I'm not trying to be biased. I mean, I got a Bengal headband on, a Bengal jersey on, but I'm not trying to be biased. But you look at the teams they've played. I mean, they nearly lost to the Cowboys. They nearly lost to RG3 and Trace McSorley. They lost to Washington, but I am going to give that one. Washington's much better than people give them credit for. But I don't think the Steelers just aren't really as good as people think. And I still think there's a scenario where they don't even win the AFC North because they still have to play the Colts and the Browns. Those are not easy opponents at all. The Bills, I mean, like I said, they're really, really impressive. And I think they have an actual shot of being in the Super Bowl. A game to me that kind of surprised me was the Eagles and the Saints. I was surprised that Jalen Hurts played well to a certain extent. I thought he was going to play good because you really didn't have much film on him. I mean, obviously we had no preseason in the NFL this year, and with Hurts, you didn't have a whole lot of film to understand how to play against them. And the Saints defense is really, really good, and they did not allow a 100-yard rusher for like 3 or 4 years, something crazy. They allowed 2 that game. And to me, Jalen Hurts reminds me. Now I know it's only one game. I'm not trying to be overreaction, but I don't see a better comparison than Lamar Jackson because, I mean, to me, Hurts is far more or less athletic than Jackson and less mobile. But it's the type of scenario where if you stop the run on him, it's going to be difficult for him to play. And with the teams that finally figuring out how to stop Lamar Jackson, I think teams will figure out how to stop Jalen Hurts earlier. But I was really impressed with Hurts. It's going to be interesting to find a couple games for the Eagles to see what they do with Hurts and what they do with the Wentz in the offseason. Another game was the Ravens and the Browns, one of the best games of the year, possibly the best game of the year. I thought the Browns were going to win this game. I was shocked they weren't, but I still think the Browns are one of the better teams in the AFC in general and one of the better teams in the NFL. I was really surprised with Baltimore. Jackson played good, but Baltimore's offense played really well. But I mean, that was a really good performance. I know Cleveland lost, but I was really impressed with them. I mean, despite the loss, they look like a really good team, and they're going to be a great team in the next for the next couple of years.
Yeah, just start out with the Eagles Saints game. I think that kind of proves that Taysom Hill is not really worthy to be a starting quarterback. I think that's what I really took away from that game. Hurts I was impressed with. I thought Miles Sanders did really, really well as well. I think that he's a really good compliment there for Jalen Hurts, and he really helped the Eagles win that game, I think. I think for me, if the Philadelphia is going to be successful in the future, they kind of need a scheme change. I think, and so despite Carson Wentz, I think being one of the most, um, I don't want to say like hated on, but like one of the most
Criticized.
he deserves a lot more than what he's getting. I think personally, uh, I think it might be smart for the Eagles to ride out with Hurts until you see anything else happen. I think it's pretty unlikely that the Eagles release Carson Wentz because I believe they actually lose money in dead cap if they actually cut him. So that's going to be a huge loss for their team if they had to cut him because that's going to be less money. So I think that you probably are almost forced to keep him at this point. And I would just keep on with if Hurts keeps doing this well, keep playing him. If he play the better man, I believe. But at the same time, I feel like next season you get your whole entire team back healthy. You hopefully your weapons come back and is able to string together consistency that they really, really direly need. I think then you probably try to at least bring Carson Wentz back one game and see if he can go back to the form he was before because he was an MVP a couple years back, and I think he can get back to that form again. As for the Ravens-Browns game, completely agree with you. Game of the year. I didn't watch it live, unfortunately, but I went back and watched it on the Game Pass, and it was very, very fun to watch that game. I thought just so much fun to see teams go back and forth. I thought Baker Mayfield played very, very well down the stretch and thought that he was leading them to they look like a winning team. I mean, they are a winning team, granted, but they look like a winning team. The amount of improvement they have made from week 1 to now is crazy because they were blown out by the Ravens last year by 30, or the beginning of the year by 30, and now they're taking them down to the wire at the end of the game. And quite honestly, I thought that they were going to win if Lamar Jackson didn't come back and throw that dart to Hollywood Brown and Justin Tucker wasn't so consistent. This would be the Browns' game. They would have won it. I want to give so much credit to the Browns. I am higher on them after this loss than what I was before. And I think this is a game where both teams come out of it better, and I think it was a positive for both teams, despite the Browns still losing.
Yeah, you mentioned Wentz. I think you look at him. He has not played good this year. There's no denying that he hasn't. But you look what he's had. He doesn't have a really good wide receiver. I mean, he has Miles Sanders, but the offensive line is really shaky. There's been injuries there. I was on somebody's podcast the other day. We were mentioning Phillip Rivers' contract ends at the end of the season. It's a 1 for 20 year, I believe, 1 year for $20 million, and it expires at the end of the year. Jacoby Brissett, I believe, I know he has a big contract, but I don't know how much it is. But Frank Wright, who was with the Eagles during Wentz's MVP year, is with Indianapolis Colts. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles want to keep Hurts, and if he continues to play well the final 3 games of the year, if Wentz could maybe go to the Colts. And like you mentioned, the Browns. I believe the Browns have 4 losses, but the Steelers have 2. And like I mentioned, they still have to play the Colts and the Browns. Those are not easy wins at all. You could have a tiebreaker for the AFC North division game. I believe that would still go to Pittsburgh, but I've been really, really impressed with Cleveland this year. And to me, it's kind of not strange. Isn't it kind of strange that Beckham gets hurt and then all of a sudden Cleveland does well? I know I've kind of mentioned when it's being traded to Indianapolis, but Beckham got hurt and then the Browns are just on fire. I know they lost, but they still played really well. Do you think that Wentz should be traded to Indianapolis if that's a possibility? And do you think Cleveland should trade Beckham in the offseason?
I think the issue with Wentz being traded is that Philadelphia has very little, if any, leverage in their trades because they are, they'd be desperate to trade Wentz. And even then, you're hoping that they take on most of the contract because NFL teams can say, we'll take Wentz, but you're paying half of this. And then you're still losing a lot of money to get rid of a player that could still be really good. So, it sucks for the Eagles because they're going to they might actually have to put in a pretty solid pick just to trade him away. And that's kind of unfortunate because, you want to you want to add capital for such a great starting quarterback like a guy like Carson Wentz, but just the contract issues in general. The Colts know that they have leverage if they ever decided to do that trade, and they know that they can probably get something extra out of it because his team wants to get rid of that contract. You're taking, he might be a big upgrade over Phillip Rivers, but you'd still be taking on 13, 14 mil of that possible 20-something mil that Wentz is making right now. So the Eagles would be saving $14 million, but at the same time, they're not even using Wentz at this point. He's their backup. I mean, for assuming Hurts continues to be the starter. So it'd be weird to see that trade, I guess, occur. I could see it happening maybe if the Colts felt like they wanted the quarterback really bad, wanted to pay a guy like Carson Wentz that much money. But at the same time, his contract makes it so hard to get out of. That was a big mistake by the Eagles to do that, especially after all the injuries he's had in the past. I thought that it was very, very risky, and I think the risk ended up being on the bad side. So it's unfortunate for the Eagles. So I really don't know if trading Wentz is on the board. As for the Browns, trading Odell Beckham Jr., Beckham is such a good player, but ever since he's been in the league, questions have arose if he was maybe an issue in the locker room mentally, if he's not bringing what he needs to the team to make him better. I think the Browns definitely need a wide receiver one, and if they got rid of Odell Beckham Jr., they'd be desperate to get a guy maybe to sign a draft. Maybe get like Devonta Smith in the draft possibly, or maybe even sign a guy like Allen Robinson or Kenny Golladay. So that would be the only reason why I'd be okay with getting rid of Odell Beckham Jr. If they were to sign a guy like Kenny Golladay, let's assume, and they do trade Odell Beckham Jr., I think that would be great for this team. They could really use some extra capital. That would save them a good amount of money. I think they'd make more money signing Golladay and letting Beckham go, and you probably also have a much more healthier player, a younger player, and a guy that's better in the locker room. So I think though Beckham's better, I think Golladay down the line is going to be better for this team because they're going to be contending for the Super Bowl 2 or 3 years down the line. And I don't know if Beckham's going to be as good then as I think Golladay will start to improve and be really, really good. So I'm doing a lot of hypotheticals and assuming here, but assuming that guy like Golladay is signed to the Browns, then I really understand the move. I think it'd be a great move to get rid of Odell Beckham Jr. and get some capital back.
Yeah, I love Kenny Golladay. To me, I think he's a top 10 receiver. And I sound kind of crazy, but look at the production he's had the last several years. He's just really been amazing. I think that would be a really smart move by Cleveland to pick up Golladay. I mean, I know it doesn't really make sense, but I wouldn't mind the Bengals to sign him. I know it won't happen, but I'm just really a big fan of him. We don't really have much time left. Can you talk? Are there any games? Kind of quickly that you like this week in the NFL?
I haven't gotten the chance to see a lot of the NFL games this week. Coming from a Bengals fan, Bengals Steelers, we're going to get that again. That's going to be probably a blowout, so not really a very interesting game to watch. I could be wrong, but do the Bills play the Dolphins this week? I want to say that they might.
I believe so. I'm not for sure, but I think so.
I could be wrong. I'm not sure. I do know that they play the rest of the NFC of their division for the rest of the year, and whenever week that is, I haven't really got to see the schedule that much. I have to do my pick'em still, so I haven't gotten the chance to see the whole entire schedules. But if that game is on, that would be a very, very important game for both teams because that's big for playoff seeding. But definitely keeping an eye on all the wild card games, the Raiders, the Dolphins, teams like that who really, really need wins to help their resume. Even the Ravens who still need, even after beating the Browns, are still out of the playoffs. They need to continue to win and still help their resume out. Teams like that in the AFC, I think it's key. And also maybe looking at the Cardinals and the Vikings game in the NFC because it really feels like those are the only two teams contending for that 7th seed spot. Those are going to be huge as well. The Cardinals have really fallen apart lately, and they're going to need to bounce back.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bills and the Dolphins. I believe they play the final week of the season. They may play this week too, but I mean, I know there's a couple of division games that they play like one week somebody else, and then another week there's a couple of games like that. I know they play the final week. They may play this week, but I'm not for sure.
I don't think so.
I really like Seattle and Washington. I think that's going to be a great game. Seattle's offense has been pretty inconsistent. I mean, really the past month or two. And they scored 40 points against the Jets, but it's the Jets. Wilson's been inconsistent. Their defense is getting better ever since the Carlos Dunlap trade. But, I mean, Washington, to me, they're going to be – you look at teams with bright futures. I think you look at the Bengals, the Broncos, and the Washington football team. There's a couple other teams, but I'm just really impressed with Washington. I'll go with the upset. I think Washington could win. Their defense. You look at their defensive linemen. I mean, Sweat, Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. I mean, Gibson's played really well in the offense. Terry McLaurin's played like a top 10 receiver. If they get a good quarterback in the first round, let's say they don't win their division, which means they would have a better draft spot, and if Zach Wilson's somehow available, I mean, you're looking like I sound kind of if you get a good quarterback, like I'm not saying a great, like if they sign a good quarterback in the offseason instead of drafting one, I don't know, I don't know who's all available. Good one, I think they're a Super Bowl contender. I know it sounds crazy, but their defense is outstanding. I also like the Browns and the Giants. The Giants look promising. The Browns sort of bounced back against the Ravens. I do have the Browns winning that one. The Saints play the Chiefs. I don't think this will be close. Well, no, I take that back. I think the Chiefs will win probably about 10, but Taysom Hill playing is going to not help New Orleans at all, just like I did last week. They really need Breeze back by the time the postseason starts, but that's I have the Chiefs winning that one. So we kind of talked about some games from this past week and games this week. The final topic is who was your MVP favorite? Like, who do you think should win the MVP right now in the NFL?
I got to give it to Aaron Rodgers from Green Bay. What he's done this year statistically, there are quarterbacks that are up there in the same areas as him, but the fact that he is playing with practice squad guys, Robert Tonyan is I believe, I don't even know that's how you pronounce it, but is their starting tight end right now, a guy that no one heard of until this year, but he has looked fantastic with Aaron Rodgers. You're seeing guys like Valdez-Scantling look really, really well. Devontae Adams, that connection between Adams and Rodgers has been special this year. When you talk about most valuable player to a team, I'm not sure if there's another quarterback outside of maybe Mahomes and Russell Wilson that could be nearly as successful with this Green Bay Packers team as Aaron Rodgers has. If they take out Rodgers from this picture, this team is at the bottom of the league without question. They have no one outside of that. Their defense is still really good. I'll give them that. On the opposite side, though, they wouldn't be able to move the ball. It's just impossible. There would be no chance. Rodgers, what he has done this year for their offense has been huge. Everyone was angry that Green Bay didn't get any weapons last year. They're like, they don't have any weapons. What is Rodgers going to do? Rodgers turned around and said, well, we're going to make some weapons. And now all these practice squad guys are going off. So we got to give it to Rodgers. He has been fantastic this year. I love seeing him do well. He deserves it. I feel like this Jordan Love, having them draft Jordan Love really kind of set a fire under him and let him perform so well this year. He deserves MVP, and that's my MVP for this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned Robert Tonyan. I believe he was an undrafted free agent from a couple of years ago. I don't know where he played college at, but Rodgers has made him look like he's an all-pro tight end this year. And Rodgers really has limited weapons when you compare him to other teams. But in 2 games when Devontae Adams was out this year, Rodgers was still able to manage to throw for over 300 yards a game and 7 touchdowns in just 2 games. It's 39 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing, 4 interceptions in the season. He's averaging over 260 passing yards a game. To me, I really don't think it's close that he is the the MVP favorite. Mahomes played really well too, but I really think Rodgers is the most best quarterback and best player in the league this year. I did not realize what time it was. So go ahead, and is there anything you'd like to mention after that?
Yeah, feel free to follow my Instagram, @StrivePipe Sports, my Twitter @Blake Jude 714, and this is going to be a pretty fun last couple of weeks of football here. So let's get buckle up, get ready. Playoff time's coming, and even though our Bengals aren't in, it's still pretty exciting to go watch some of those games. So I'm looking forward to these last couple of weeks of football and crunch time in fantasy football as well. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Make sure to go follow Blake. I'll put the link in the description to follow him. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you next time on the Sports 2 Hines Show.